Hi everybody, top quality video this one. 6 incredible diagrams for your macroeconomics exams and essays where you guys can show off so heavily with these wonderful diagrams, but also use these diagrams to score higher marks, to back up your evaluation, to back up your analysis. They're going to be absolutely insane for you. This video complements my other video on power macro diagrams. Make sure you watch that one as well as this. These diagrams are gold for you guys. Let's get into it. What's diagram number 1? Know that you can use output gaps as incredible evaluation whenever you're shifting AD or LRAS. It's the Keynesian ADAS model that you can use when it comes to output gap evaluation. So take, for example, a shift of AD, but when the economy's got loads of spare capacity, when there is a large negative output gap, for example, where AD1 is, right? At Y1, there is a huge negative output gap. Well, you can say that expansionary demand side policies, expansionary monetary or fiscal policies that work in boosting AD right from AD1 to AD2 can increase growth. Yes, Y1 to Y2 can then reduce unemployment. Yes, but without the demand pull inflationary pressure that theory assumes. So that trade-off of high inflation is less likely to occur when there is a large negative output gap. Not just when expansionary demand side policies are used, but any AD shift to the right. You can evaluate the inflation trade-off by using that output gap evaluation. Equally, if LRAS is shifting right from a situation of a large negative output gap at AD1, you can argue that actually that shift is barely going to do anything for macro performance. Actually, what's necessary is for demand side policies to be used that use up spare capacity in the economy rather than supply side policies or an LRAS shift that creates more spare capacity, you might argue. Whereas flip it around, imagine the economy's got a very small negative output gap or maybe is in a positive output gap territory. You can show that, for example, with AD3, very, very close to YFE, maybe at YFE. Well, an AD shift right, maybe because of demand side policies to AD4 is going to be more inflationary in its impact. The dominant impact will be high inflation rather than seeing the benefits of higher growth and lower unemployment. So output gap evaluation is awesome. Anytime AD is shifting right or left, but also for LRAS shifts, use the Keynesian model. Super helpful to back up the evaluation point you're making. Carry on. We all know about the tariff diagram, but do you know there are diagrams to illustrate free trade as well? There are 2 of them. This first one is your general free trade diagram. Use that when you're generally or generically talking about the benefits of trade, the costs of trade. We have an autarky starting point, a closed economy starting point at P1, Q1, then the country opens up to free trade, you end up with lower prices and quantity changes on the x-axis. That's fine, but also you have another way to show free trade. This diagram is your trade creation diagram. You can see it's basically just a tariff removal diagram, the reverse of how you normally draw a tariff diagram. Use this diagram if a country's negotiating free trade, maybe they're signing free trade deals, maybe they're joining trading blocs. That's where you can draw this diagram. So these diagrams are wonderful. You can back up the benefits of free trade with these diagrams. We can see gains of comparative advantage, allocative efficiency. We can see lower prices. We can see higher quantities, right? We can see the benefits of economic growth and export revenue. But you can go into more detail if you can dissect the diagrams into more minute parts. You can see gains of foreign producer revenue, which you can link to export revenue. You can see gains of consumer surplus as prices come down, but also you can use these diagrams to showcase the problems of free trade. You can link to lower domestic producer revenue, losses of domestic producer surplus, contractions along the domestic supply curve, indicating deindustrialization or industry decline. So being able to use diagrams to that kind of level, these free trade diagrams, awesome when you're backing up your analysis, your benefits of free trade, but also if you're evaluating free trade going into the issues. There you go, 2 great diagrams there. Now, to illustrate the crowding out effect, there is a wonderful diagram that goes along the theory. Remember, the crowding out effect says that debt-fueled expansionary fiscal policy could crowd out the private sector by increasing interest rates in the loanable funds market. So you can draw the loanable funds market. What are loanable funds? They're just people's savings. Our savings, if we save in a bank, can create loans for others. Our savings, if we buy bonds, can create loans for governments, for businesses. So think of just the loanable funds market as just people's savings, basically. The supply curve is made up of savers. The demand curve is made up of borrowers. Think governments, firms who want to borrow money. Where the two meet is equilibrium, I1, and then Q1 on this diagram. The equilibrium interest rate is determined there. But then you would say that, look, debt-fueled expansionary fiscal policy, borrowing-fueled expansionary fiscal policy will mean that the government is increasing demand for loanable funds. The government is looking to borrow more and more, increasing demand for those savings, shifting the demand curve on this diagram to the right from D1 to D2. As that happens, look what we see with interest rates. Interest rates get pushed up, making it more expensive for private sector firms to borrow and invest, thus crowding out the private sector, restricting private sector investment. There you go, the crowding out diagram to go alongside the theory that you're writing. Wonderful in evaluation for you. Oh yes. Next to the role of the automatic stabilizers, another great way to evaluate expansionary fiscal policy. And what you can say is if the role of the automatic stabilizers is strong, their effect is strong, the need for discretionary fiscal policy, that's expansionary fiscal policy on top of the automatic stabilizers, it's much less. And you can use a great diagram to back you up. Just remember, there are two automatic stabilizers, automatic effects of fiscal policy. One is a progressive income tax system. Second is a welfare benefit system. And how in recession, those automatic stabilizers can help support the economy, prevent AD from collapsing and creating a very deep recession. But also in a boom, how these automatic stabilizers can cushion the economy, help just to keep the economy cooled a little bit and prevent very, very high inflationary pressures. So in a recession in particular, what you could argue is as people's incomes fall, they might get pushed down into lower income tax bands. It helps prevent consumption dropping off massively, but also more government spending on welfare benefits as unemployment rises can help to prop up AD a little bit and prevent it collapsing completely, preventing the recession being so big. Vice versa, in a boom, how the economy can cool down as incomes rise and people are dragged up into higher income tax bands, but also how there's less spending overall on benefits can help cool down AD and prevent AD rising, creating huge inflationary pressure. Diagrammatically, the impact of that is how fluctuations in the economic cycle could well be lesser if the role of the automatic stabilizers is strong. So what you can draw is how normally these are the big fluctuations, but with the automatic stabilizers, the fluctuations can be much less. Something like this instead. Much, much smaller because of the impact of the automatic stabilizers. You can then label that the automatic stabilizer effect. Great evaluation of expansionary fiscal policy, the need for it, whether it needs to be so strong, incredible, back it up with a great diagram, you're good to go. These are just beautiful, sexy, sexy diagrams. We continue. And boy, if you really want to show off, you could draw Kuznets curves in your macro essays. Yeah, named after Simon Kuznets, the founder of GDP, but also he came out with very interesting theories. Use these when you're talking about potential trade-offs with economic growth, environmental trade-offs, income inequality trade-offs. Kuznets says, if we take the environmental damage one first, that yeah, when countries grow in size initially, they industrialize, that can come with significant environmental damage, but only up to a point, a turning point. He talks about when countries get to a certain per capita income level or a certain GDP size, growth can continue to rise, but without massive environmental trade-offs because countries transition into tech-based industries, into services-based industries, which are naturally less polluting. But also as incomes get to a certain level, governments can put in policies to bring down environmental trade-offs, knowing that the electorate can afford them. And that can help to reduce environmental damage. Also, attitudes towards growth changes as incomes rise. Suddenly people don't want growth that comes with environmental damage that reduces their living standards. They want cleaner growth, growth that actually improves their standard of living without damaging the environment too much. And with inequality, again, as countries grow in size, there can be a trade-off of rising inequality from over-specialized growth, yes, but also from urbanized growth. Those who work in rural areas don't see the same kind of income growth as those who are in the big cities, but only up to a point. When per capita incomes get to a certain level, when GDP sizes get to a certain level, attitudes towards growth and inequality change. Suddenly, people want more inclusive growth. There might be protests or riots if inequality remains very, very high. But also, governments might now start to put in place policies to reduce inequality, like spending more on healthcare and education, like a welfare benefit scheme, like a progressive income tax scheme, like maybe Policies like minimum wages might start to come in, but also naturally economies transition. They become more balanced, they diversify. With that, you get more balanced job creation, which helps to bring down levels of income inequality. So yeah, Kuznets curves are absolutely incredible to make a judgment about the extent of these trade-offs with economic growth. Oh my God, imagine you drawing these, you're gonna come across like a pure economics don and genius. That's what you want to do in these essays, right? Come across like a genius. Here you go with two quality diagrams. And the last diagram is how to illustrate comparative advantage on a diagram. You don't want to be under exam conditions having to work out numbers and hope that it works with lowest opportunity cost to then show comparative advantage. There is a really nifty trick so that you can draw a diagram to show trading PPFs, to show comparative advantage, but without the need for numbers. Here's how you do it. So with two goods on the axis, you take two different countries, their PPF curves, trading PPF curves, draw one shallow, one steep. You can show with a country here having an absolute advantage in both, that's absolutely fine as well. But the point is that the country that has the shallower PPF curve, in this case Ghana, will always have the comparative advantage for whatever good or service is on the x-axis. So in this case cotton. Ghana has the comparative advantage in cotton. A shallower curve simply means that the opportunity cost of production for whatever is on the x-axis is lower than for the other country. You don't need to explain that in your writing. Just draw it as such and say, well, Ghana has the lower opportunity cost in making cotton given their shallower PPF curve. And what that means is the other country will have the comparative advantage for whatever is on the y-axis. So India has the comparative advantage for computers. So if you need to quickly show a comparative advantage diagram and who has a comparative advantage in something without numbers, you can draw this diagram. Very useful in an essay if you're trying to illustrate the concept of comparative advantage. There you go. So there you have it, guys. Really great, incredible diagrams, stunning diagrams for you to show off in your macro essays. Thank you so much for watching this. Make sure you watch my other video as well on power diagrams for macro by Good to Go. We know how important these diagrams are. Stay tuned for even more videos coming your way. Lots still to come to help you. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in future ones.